Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Soul Sense podcast. We're so thankful that you're listening today or watching, because you could do both. But today we have a special guest, Marit Welker, and she's from Boise, Idaho, and she's been there for many years. She's a certified life coach, a speaker, a podcaster who helps Christian women with the process of dealing with and the hope for resolution with adult-child estrangement. And we were just talking before the show started that this is something that is so much more prevalent than even a generation ago. Marit, thank you so much for being here, and we'd love to just hear a little about you and how you got going in this direction.
I got going in this direction many years ago when I had a parent who had a very different personality than mine. And my expectation of what a good parent was ABC. And my parent was XYZ. And therefore, my parent was not a good parent. And with that expectation and, normal imperfections and challenges of life and a few extra ones that came our way, my parent was terribly bad parent. And with that thought in my mind, I pulled away from my parent. I distanced myself. We lived across the country, and I made sure that we didn't go out of our way to visit them very often. And we talked on the phone a couple of times a year. And so I was low contact with that parent, and I resented them. And it wasn't something I knew how to deal with. It wasn't something I could explain, but I felt a great deal of pain regarding that parent, which permeated many other aspects of my life. I had nightmares for over 20 years where that parent was involved, and it was excruciating. And the pain didn't go away. And for 10 years, I decided I want to love this parent. Help me to forgive. And I prayed. I'm a person of faith, and I prayed and I asked God to help me. And it didn't matter. It didn't go away. And so it was a problem that just was involved in every element of my life and was there for many years. And eventually I was able to get through that and forgive, and we're reconciled and have a great relationship.
So it went from night to day.
Yes, it really did. And it did it very quickly as well.
And so you had those years of praying, and then finally the real breakthrough was getting to total forgiveness of that parent?
The forgiveness came earlier. That was a little bit gradual. Uh, I consider that one a gift of God. In fact, when there was a close call and that person could have been hurt in a car accident and they were not hurt, but I imagined my life without them. And wow, was that a wake up. And I realized that I truly do love this person and that I was so grateful for them in my life. And I was able to forgive everything. But the trust wasn't there and the fear was there. The harm had been done, and I wasn't able to let go and fully trust. And any behaviors that leaned in that direction would still bring up fear and hesitance. And that last step to really 100% let things go was something that took probably another 5 years, to maybe 10 years before it was gone. And then it was completely gone.
Whoa. And once you completely let go, it was like one day you knew, I can have a relationship.
Well, the relationship never cut off completely. We
Oh,
went
it
low
didn't cut
contact.
completely. Okay.
The no
Okay.
contact was with my child. My
Okay.
child rejected me and said, "This is it. No more
Okay.
interaction with my spouse, no more interaction with my children.
Okay.
You're never seeing me again." And then they left my life.
Okay.
That was an entirely different experience. That was very in your face, it was very permanent, and it was very confrontational. Mine was more of a resistance and hostility and anger and resentment, but the words weren't said. The attitude
I
was felt.
see. I see. So those are at least two major ways that
Yes,
breach happens, right? One is
exactly.
the low contact and perhaps not even spoken directly why we're doing that. The
Exactly.
other one is this
Exactly.
blatant expression and then no contact cut off. Are those the
Yes.
two major ways that we'll see this? Are there other
Yes.
major ways, Marit?
Not that I know of. Those are the
Okay.
primary two that I have seen. Many do not consider the first one a full estrangement. I have felt the hostility. I have felt what it is like radiating from the couch across the room or across the dinner table. I know what that's like. I have felt it inside myself and I have felt it from others. I consider that a form of estrangement. And yet it can be happening under your very roof. It does not mean that there's no contact, but I still consider that a form of estrangement. And that is one thing that I work with. But
That's
the no
good.
contact one is the one most people speak of when they refer to estrangement.
That's true. That is true. And sometimes the no contact will drift back to the low contact, and then it's still a type of estrangement, but it's not the 100%, right?
I would argue that it would be less likely to do that. The no
Okay.
contact, when the no contact comes, it usually stays there
Okay.
or awkwardly comes back. But no, I think when it's coming back, it's usually not reverting to the hostility without it. It's usually the reverse direction where
Okay.
you might feel the hostility and then go no contact, but not the other direction, in my experience.
Um, Marit, when you're coaching, um, and you get that first meeting, that first coaching meeting with this Christian woman, Christian mother, what's that first part like? You're just hearing the story, right? I mean, what you hear, I'm sure you've heard so many stories, but tell us a little bit about some of those stories and how you begin, with a mother that's, I'm sure, so heartbroken. You
Oh,
know what it's like yourself.
okay. I'm going to tell you one that's going to blow your socks off today. I spoke with a woman today, just
Okay.
today, and that person has lost more than one child
Mm.
um, to death
Oh no.
and one to estrangement.
Oh,
And that person told me estrangement is more painful than death.
wow. I believe that.
I have a close friend whose whose husband took their life. And they say that it's comparable to having your spouse murdered and divorced simultaneously.
Oh my. And so you hear these stories. Um, Tell us about the course of working with them. Walk us through this because it's so heartbreaking. And we understand there's going to be listeners that have been on either side of that. Maybe
Mhm,
they're the
mhm.
child, maybe they're the mother or the parent. So there's going to be ones on either side. And I've heard some of the stories. Well, this is my justification, etc. And of course, the estrangement in its most significant way is treating that person as if they're dead. You're treating them like they're dead. I'm not going to contact them. They can't see my family. They can't see their grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is like you're calling them dead to you. But tell us a little bit about entering in with. Of course, this is maybe the first time you heard the story of this lady this morning. But what do you walk them through?
Here's the thing. In this circumstance, I mentioned that. I do want to throw out one more idea, and that is that there's no closure. A funeral happens when you lose your child.
It's
This has
true.
no closure. This leaves you with some hope. So you've got that raw pain
Yeah.
there that is never fulfilled. And you are still allowed to hope, but there's no funeral, there's no casseroles, there's no cards. Additionally, when you are going through that pain, you are, your child is also going through similar pain. And that's the interesting thing. As the
Mm.
child who went through that experience, I can tell you that
Mhm.
even though my pain was not valid entirely, I
Yep.
didn't have my prefrontal cortex fully developed when I developed these attitudes and ideas. And I didn't understand my parents' background. I didn't
Mhm.
understand the experiences that my parent had been raised in that led
Mhm.
them to be that way.
Mhm.
There was absolutely no way that they could understand or adapt to what I was expecting or desiring of them. It was
Mhm.
completely beyond impossibility.
Yep.
And yet it was what I was demanding. Now,
Mhm.
if I could have understood that, I might not have done it. I might still have, but I might not have done it. But in the circumstances, I was hurting. And whether my pain was valid or not, it was real. So whether you are the child who is estranged, whether your reasons feel legitimate to the other person or not, your pain is very real. And I won't argue that fact. I won't ever
Mhm.
diminish that fact. It's something that both sides need to recognize, in my opinion, the intensity of that pain. The first
Thank
thing
you.
we work on is understanding their identity.
Okay.
Because as a faith based coach, if they understand that they are a mother, then this brings a type of destruction to that.
Uh-huh.
And if we can shift their identity back to a woman who is a daughter of God, instead of being wrapped around the role of mother, then they find more strength and more centering. And the reason this is so important is because when a woman gives birth to a child or adopts or becomes a foster parent or whatever, when that woman becomes a mother to that child, especially at birth, I'll use that as an example.
Okay.
There's incredible sleep deficit. There's
Mm.
incredible sacrifice. There's incredible amounts of work to a degree that she has likely never experienced.
Mm.
Additionally, there's an incredible amount of love to which she has probably never been exposed. Um, it's an incredible level of happiness, and our new experience, our new levels of joy are wonderful, but they're also uh, rewriting our identity. We're no longer a woman who's a mother. We become a mother who's a
Yes.
woman. And that's key, in my opinion, is to understand who we are. When you ask a man, who are you? They might
Right.
say, I'm a podcaster.
Sure.
I'm a uh, whatever, all kinds of things. Whatever
Mhm.
his professional thing
Mhm.
is, whatever his, I'm a Yankees fan,
Sure.
whatever. But what they need to also recognize is that they are also a husband, a father, a son of God, whatever their identity is. But when you ask a woman who she is, generally her professional career is going to come second, and her identity as a mother would probably come first to most women's minds,
Yes.
depending who she's talking to, what format she's been asked. But that's probably how she thinks of herself, is as a mother. So when suddenly this child rips that away from her and says, "You're a terrible mother," it can really reduce us to dust. So that's where we start. We want to help them refine and retrain their identity so that they are, I say we, it's me. So that is where
Sure.
I start.
Sure. That's
I
where you
help
start.
them I help them to retrain their identity so that it is focused on their relationship with God. And if that is firmly established, then everything else falls into place or falls out of their life. When my identity is daughter of God and I'm a Christian, then my happiness and peace will come because of my relationship with God, not because of what my children are doing. And I think one of the core things that we try to get into their head and into their heart is that their child does not define their worth. In fact, if you're a Christian woman and you're listening, if you've been estranged from your child, your worth is not defined by your child's choices or your actions, by your child's response to mistakes you've made. Your worth is defined by 3 nails in a cross. Your worth is defined by the weight of the sins of the world. And if you understand that that is who defines your worth, that you are worth everything, that you are worth creating an earth for, then that gives you a feeling of power and of peace and of strength and of joy and of hope that is disconnected from your relationship with your child. Now, I also believe that God created families and he wants families to be connected.
Yes.
And so if we are connected to God, if we are doing things right, then what we will do is we will be living in the best way possible with our children, connecting with them and making their lives better. We will be making the choices that will bring us closer to God and bring them closer to God. But one thing that all parents have is blind spots. And
Right.
those blind spots, they sure get in the way.
Yeah, they
You know,
do.
you know, I mean, I can remember times when I alienated a child because I was exhausted, they were exhausted, and they would bring up a problem they had in tears. And then to emphasize how painful it was, they would go on and belabor the point and get wrapped around the axle about the point and go on and on. And it's 11:30 at night and I'm tired and they're tired and I know they'll feel better in the morning and I tell them to go to sleep and we'll deal with it then. And they start bringing in every other bad problem that might have gone in that direction through time. And they're just stacking all the bad things up and feeling worse and worse. And I just would dismiss it and say, look, I'll talk to you in the morning.
Sure.
But if I didn't know that my child was feeling suicidal, that my child was having an identity crisis or something, and I dismissed it, and they never told me that, then that's something that they were rejected in the moment they needed me most. And how could
Hmm.
I know that?
Yeah.
But if I had, been more in tune with, as I say in my faith, been more in tune with the whisperings of God, the workings in my heart, or mother's intuition, or whatever you want to call it, I might have seen that more, been more in tune with the needs of my child. If you're the child, your parent might be going through something where they are, um, dealing with work things at the time,
Sure.
dealing with, for us, for instance, we were going through a difficult time. Our marriage was struggling a little bit, and we got embezzled by a business partner, and we ended up losing our home and our company. And we had 13 rental homes, and we lost everything. And it was demoralizing, it was depressing, and it was really difficult. But in going through that experience and going through some marital difficulties, it's actually strengthened our marriage.
Oh, good.
It was walking through hell. I mean, it was really tough. And during that time, we also had a lot of other problems, health problems, all kinds of things. And so, if during that time my child came to me with other stuff, they might not have known some of the things that were going on.
Right.
I'm not going to tell them, hey, we're having some marital difficulty. I'm sorry if I'm
No.
extra stressed,
No.
And so the child doesn't always know the whole picture, neither does the parent, and these things arise. Anyway,
Yes. And so that goes into kind of that big picture of expectations. Oh, I expected them to always be there. If I was in crisis, I expected them to always be there. And of course, the child is not supposed to know if the parent is over capacity in some of these other areas, at least not as a counselor to the parent. We
right,
understand
right.
that. And so, as parents, we have to hold on to some of those things. I mean, we see that in scripture all the time where Mary held on to things. She didn't blab it out. Jesus held on to things. And so we hold on to things, and that can be part of what has led to that breach that's a little seed to start with. And of course, it could become giant later. Now,
Right.
as we talk about it, though, there are times, of course, where you're going to meet with a Christian woman. She's in a different place today, but maybe for several years of her child's life, she was verbally abusive, or she drank too much alcohol, or was an alcoholic. There might be some of those blatant things that we understand are some deep hurts, but we're, of course, um, wanting this woman not only to gain her identity, but to be able to fully accept forgiveness from God for her more blatant failures. I'm sure that must be one of the things that you work with in coaching, is accepting that mercy from God, right?
Actually, no. Um,
Oh, okay.
no. Their identity is Christian, and Christ is at the center of everything. So, well, it is, but it's a very minor thing. We're
Okay.
all imperfect.
Oh, we
We
are,
are
yes.
all imperfect, and so that is something that we are not uh, focusing on, because most of these moms, almost all of them, are nearly crucifying themselves over this.
Okay. Okay.
They live in guilt mode. Mom guilt is a real thing, and this is called the silent epidemic. And the reason it's called that is because when, for instance, when my child rejected me, I told no one. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell family members. And the reason why was to, in this case, to protect them,
Okay.
because I felt that it was completely misconstrued. I felt that it was completely, that they were completely in the wrong. And all of our, we were in too close of circles. We all knew the exact same people. And I didn't want to besmirch their name. And also, it was something that, it was a great judgment on me. What I didn't know at the time is that all moms do this, but for different reasons, but the amount of shame and guilt that it brings with it. And it can happen to the best moms. People
Right.
respond differently. I responded primarily in anger at first and
Mhm.
self-righteousness, but because I wasn't impacted as strong. Um, I had told you previously that I had been through brain injury, through 13 concussions. I had been through cancer. I had been bedridden for 18 months, at which time I learned my identity. And that's when I learned to see the world the way God sees the world.
Hmm.
And with that perspective, that's where most of my lessons were learned. I learned how to be happy no matter what's happening in your life. I learned how to surrender to God. And I don't mean surrender like, oh, yes, here, you can have my sins. No, no, no.
Right.
I mean, this is, my life is thine. Okay. It's it's yours. Take it, all of it.
Mm.
And I don't mean I would die for God. I mean, I will live for God in everything. That's what I'm trying to do.
Mm.
Do I make mistakes? Every day, every hour I make mistakes. But that's my goal. That's my why. That's what motivates me and helps me get out of bed in the morning, is trying to live for God. And that was not a change that happened easily. And if I hadn't been in such dire circumstances, I couldn't have come to that.
Oh, I
That
see.
was my journey. But that put me in a strong place to start with, because if
Okay.
my child rejects me, unlike most mothers, that's not a judgment on me. In my case, that was a judgment on my child.
Mhm.
It was their action, not mine.
Mhm.
And I knew my status with God. I knew where I stood with God, and I knew my inner strength. Now, does that mean I did things perfectly? Oh, heck no. Uh-uh.
No.
And uh, in my story, it was very unusual. It was a few days in, and I was going through the motions and, living my life. And
Mhm.
it was, frankly, it was the first time in my life I've had a chance to focus on me, because up until then, I'd been raising kids. I have 5 of them, and
Okay.
I had been raising kids and living for them, and, it'd been 34, 33 years of that, and then the grandchildren lived with us for a couple of years with their parents, and so I had been so heavily focused on trying to help other people, whether it was my children or my helping my children so that parenting would be easier for them, etc. Um, and finally, I got to focus on me and on what I wanted, and it took me a while to figure out what that was, and that became
Wow.
being a life coach.
Okay.
But I was enjoying that. Well, it was a good thing, and I had that finally had the time and the energy to focus on that without other people in my life besides my 4 children who were, didn't have children at the time.
Sure.
And then I saw a toy that had been left behind, and it was in the guest room behind the door jamb, and I glanced down and saw it, and it undid me,
Uh-oh.
and I collapsed on the floor, and I cried in a way I had never in my life, and laid on the floor sobbing. And I had spent countless hours, it seemed, playing with those little children on my lap with that particular toy. And my arms were so empty, and my lap was so empty. And I knew I might never see those grandchildren again. And
Yeah.
if I did, it would probably be when they were adults.
Yeah.
And it was a heavy burden.
Yes.
And I prayed and I fasted for 3 days. And at the end of 3 days, I prayed and I asked God, I don't know how I could carry this. And I said, will you carry this pain for me? And from that very moment, He did.
Oh.
From that moment on, it was just a fact. It was as powerful as anything I've ever seen, any miracle I've ever felt. It was just a fact, like the day of the week or an item on a menu. There was no more uh, sting in it. It was just a thing. And I went about my life and I was able to function and things were going great. And I just refused to dwell on it because I didn't want to jinx it.
Hmm. I get that.
But I it was at that point, that is when I was able to start seeing the things I had done wrong. That
Wow.
was when, as I prayed, as I read the Bible, that I could feel that inspiration that helped me to see the things that had hurt my child that I had done or not done, more specifically, not done
I
in
see.
my child's life that were interpreted the way that they had been.
So
That's when I
now,
could see what was caused, what had caused their interpretation of events, and I could make the changes, and I did. I made the changes,
wow.
and a few days ago, I was told that I have made all the changes necessary and things are great. I mean, things have been great for a couple years now.
Okay. A couple years. Praise God.
About 18 months, things have been great. It started out very awkward and difficult, but I believe God brought us back together. It kind of forced us to get back into the same situation, and and I made the changes I needed to make, and ate crow about things
Yes.
that somebody needed to, and I
Yep.
chose to do that,
Yep.
and um, went through the process, and things are good. Things are really good in both directions, both with my
That
parent
is
and with my child.
both directions. So wonderful to hear. So,
And no
Marit,
words can
what
describe that joy.
no, no words could describe that. I can't. It's hard. It just hearing it. Words are not enough. But here's what I hear. Um, Identity came first,
Hmm.
and then eventually you hit that grief, and it hits you like a Mack truck. It just hits you for those days, and so that was pushing you towards that reality and pushing you towards the acceptance. But when you realized that the weight was too much, you had to surrender it to God. You
Yes.
can't carry it. You realized, I'm a sheep. I'm not designed to be a burden bearer. I have to give this to you, God. And only then once you had those three breakthroughs, you began to see some things that God just started to drop in, and you go, okay, there are some adjustments to be made. There is some crow to eat. And isn't that true for all of us? Come on.
I think to some degree. I
Yeah.
think I was angrier than most.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
every personality is different, and I
Yep.
think some are going to be more angry. I think some are going to be more cowed is the word that's coming into my mind. A more
Okay.
timid personality, a more gentle one might have an entirely different response. I have a
Okay.
very strong, overbearing personality, and so does
Okay.
my child. And
Okay.
so we've butted heads for years, but we've always been very close anyway.
Mhm.
I think that some are hurt, and I think some parents can see, I mean, they've really done wrong, real neglect, real abuse,
Right.
and um, situations that haven't been resolved, situations that are not likely to resolve.
Mhm.
And they're going to come in with a really heavy burden. So there's different backgrounds that people come in with,
Mhm.
and their children also leave for different reasons. I mean, I'm working with people who their children have been in cults, whose children have um, gotten involved in addiction or things like of that nature, um, mental illness and depression. There's all different kinds of influence.
Yes.
Another common influence usually is the words of a person. And that might be the words of an ex. It might be seeing your uh, single parent suffer tremendously, your custodial parent, because of the actions of the ex and resenting the ex because of it. It might be what that custodial parent says about the ex. It might be, um, just developing their own ideas about it. I mean, it truly can be entirely independent of the parent. It just depends where that child goes with their attitudes and how they're interpreting the world. You see, at any given time, I use a lot of neuroscience and personal development. It's not just faith based, but at any given time, we have about 2 million stimuli that are around us, and we can't take in 2 million. But our brain and the basal ganglia at the back of our brain, we have something that's a filter, and it's going to choose which ones we take in. And that brainstem activity there is going to choose what you see. And you and I could be sitting side by side in the same room and have an entirely different experience with very little overlap based on what parts you bring in or what parts I bring in. And so if we're bringing in 130 to 150,000 of these stimuli,
Hmm.
and someone else has a very little overlap, but is there, we expect them to have the same experience we do, but that's not possible. And so our child might remember history differently because they experienced it differently at the time. And both stories might be true to that person. Only God's going to know the truth in the end. Okay. Only God can know. And as a faith based person, I can say that. If you don't believe in that, well, then there is going to be one truth. The question is, what is going to be your interpretation versus that other person's interpretation? And how much of what you have to say is true. Going in knowing that only a portion of what you say is what you believe is true. I mean, excuse me, that you only know some of the truth and they only know some of the truth, and then it's been distorted, really helps to understand the bigger picture.
That's so well put, Marit. I remember one of our pastors, after one of the biggest fights he said of his marriage with his wife, he came to the Lord, took a walk, and said, well, you know I'm right, I know I'm right, and she knows I'm right. And the Lord spoke to him in that still small voice and said, do you want to be right, or do you want to be like me? Sometimes we have to allow that trump card to come in, don't we? We really do.
Yeah. It's called the silent epidemic because when women hear about this, they take it individually because their identity is mother. It crushes them, it destroys them. They isolate. And because they isolate, they are pulling farther from their friends. They're pulling farther from other people because they don't want to talk about this. They'll go to church and then not linger afterwards. They'll stop going to church. They will stop going out. It's tragic how this impacts them. And the problem is many of these women are there or have been there for years or even decades, but they don't talk about it. 1 in 4 fathers is estranged from an adult child, is estranged
Yeah.
from a child. 1 in 4. How many fathers
Mm,
do you know?
mm,
How many of them do you know that are estranged from a child?
mhm.
This goes across socioeconomic areas. This is a serious problem. 67 million Americans are estranged from a family member. 38% of millennials are estranged from an immediate family member. 12% of them are estranged from a mother.
And Marit, there's so much that I want to say. I want to boil
Go
down a
ahead.
couple things that are really, really important. I think you're absolutely on track. I think that one of the problems is as therapists, we hear one side of the story, but we don't talk to the mom or dad. And the Bible says, don't make a decision on a matter until you've heard both sides. That's a
Right?
huge problem. Now, I'll tell you a second huge problem in the counseling business. There is a lot of flattery going on. Oh,
Yes.
that must have been terrible. That must have been
Mm-hmm.
horrible. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, whatever. And it's one thing for me to process with my client. It's another thing to jump to the conclusion somehow that, oh, this needs to be cut off. I
Yes.
loathe hearing that from other counselors. For example, in Texas, all states have this, but if someone comes and threatens me in my house or breaks in, I have a right because my life is threatened to shoot them and kill them. And I promise you, in Texas, I will not be in trouble if somebody broke in with a gun into my house and I shoot them.
Right.
However, in these relationships, when I cut my parent off, I'm treating them as if they're dead. I'm treating them as if my life is in danger. And no one would argue if your life is actually in danger. If they're putting poison in your tea, then you have to cut them off. But that's not usually the case. And so, Mara, when I think about it years ago, and I think it agrees with a lot of what you said, I came up with a concept called the healing zone.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the healing zone is like this. I grow up over here in the forest in my family, and I can't see the forest for the trees. And let's just say, it's there's every family has a certain amount of dysfunction, but I could stay so close to the forest that I can't for a long time see the forest for the trees. So I'm
Right.
not in the healing zone. However, the temptation might be, often is, to go way far away, and you're so far away that you're never triggered. And
Mm-hmm.
it turns out you have to be triggered to get healed. So, somewhere in the middle is the healing zone where I've got enough distance for perspective, but I'm close enough and connected enough that I could actually allow those triggers to bring me to those places that I need to get healing. Actually allow that to happen. And I think that's a lot of what you're saying is we have an epidemic of going far away, shutting the relationship down when it's not actually life threatening. It's just more convenient, or it's something that you don't want to deal with. And my goodness, if I went and took my 3-year-old out to the adoption facility and just gave it up, it would be a lot easier for me, but then I wouldn't get the blessing of raising the child.
Right. Right.
There's a lot of things that are easier just to cut off.
Well, yeah. And I agree with what you're saying. I think it's more than that though, because I think that minimizes a little bit the quantity of pain that a child is in. A child does not come to this stage of cutting off without being in extreme pain. This is not a decision made suddenly, and this is not a decision made quickly. This is a decision that is made because they are hurting so much they don't see a way around it. Now, they
They
don't
feel
see a way
hopeless.
around. They feel hopeless, they feel overwhelmed, they feel unheard, unseen, and that this is destroying them. Okay, now that happens most of the time. Now, again, there are many reasons for leaving a child, for leaving a parent, and those include things like mental illness. They include things like uh, having a new boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, counselor, therapist who advises them and shows them a certain perspective. And this is one thing that's really important to understand neuroscience in is we never remember our life as it is. We are not computers with brains that have facts. What we do is we are looking through our experience and we're going back through it, shuffling through, saying, well, you are this kind of parent. Well, as a parent, I'm going to say, well, I'm not that kind of parent. And what am I looking for? I'm going to go back through looking for all the experiences showing that I'm a good parent. Okay. And
Sure.
that's what I will remember. Whereas if the child, let's say an example, your son and you have a very close relationship, a girlfriend or a wife joins in. She's had a difficult relationship with her mother through whatever circumstances. And so she comes in with caution and she doesn't really connect with your mother. I mean, with the mother. And then she ends up saying, do you see what your parents did there? And
Mm,
your son, really sweet, says, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, she did this and this and this. Well, I don't see that, but she did this and this. And do you see how she did this and this? And then that happened. And suddenly he starts looking at things through that perspective and he begins to see it that way. And that's
yes.
just a beginning, but
Yes.
he loves you both. And he loves his new girlfriend or his wife, and he loves
Hmm.
his mother. And he's always been close to his mother. But what stage is he at? He is at the leave and cleave stage.
Hmm.
That is
Hmm.
what he is supposed to do. And he finds the love of his life, or
Hmm.
what he thinks to be is the love of his life. And then what he's doing is he is connecting with her and moving forward and listening to what she has to say. And then when he reviews his life, he finds all of the things that she talked about because he is reviewing it from that cognitive bias.
Sure.
And so from that point forward, his life is a certain way because that's what he looked for. And mom sees it a certain way because that's what she looked for. And they're not on the same page anymore. In fact, sometimes they're not even in the same hemisphere.
That's true.
And so that can be a reason, and that can happen not just with a daughter-in-law. That can also happen with a therapist, a new friend, a new support circle.
True.
But when these things happen, we need to understand and recognize that the pain is real and the problem is real.
That's
And that
good.
doesn't mean that the problem should be as big as it is. But I don't want to trivialize the pain, even if it doesn't feel like a valid reason. The pain is still very valid.
That's what we're going to hold on to, Marit, with all that we've heard about identity and surrender and getting to the place of ownership. If we can understand and have mercy that the pain is real on both sides. I love the way that you put that. I love the way that you put that. Regardless of how we get to a place, acknowledging that the pain is real. Is there we have to kind of finish this up. This has been so rich, but are there any like closing words, Marit, that you would add?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just going to go back to identity. And that is that if you can understand both sides in your
Hmm.
heart, that you are a child of God, and then submit to God to know that He knows the full truth, He knows the real picture, and that families can be healed, and that He
Yes.
wants them to heal, and that
Yes.
He paid not only for your sins, but He paid for their sins, all of them. And that if you can trust in Him and trust in His timeline and have hope, this can be healed. That's what I do. I work with the moms to help them to heal that identity so that they can go forward walking in strength and peace and joy, whether things get resolved or not. And then I help them prepare to reunite because there are steps. But here's the last thing. If
Okay.
you have a child who has disconnected from you and you aren't sure what to say and do, here's what you say. Don't reach out repeatedly. Don't
Okay.
say I love
Okay.
you 20 times.
Okay.
Don't apologize 14 times.
Okay.
Don't try to make deals. I won't do it again. What you need to say is this: I love you. My door is always open.
Good.
If you see them again on their birthday, I love you. My door is always open. Nothing else. Let them go. Give them space. Like the prodigal son's father,
Yes.
wait.
Wonderful, wonderful counselor. Marit, thank you so much for being on. Such words of wisdom from experience on both sides. I mean, that's amazing. And we so appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Thanks for being with us on Soul Sense. If something today resonated with you, take a moment, write it down, and reflect on it. And help us reach other people by subscribing, liking, leaving a comment, and sharing. We'll see you next time.